Hey everyone, Nick Marzinski here at trappinglight.com. In this video, what I'd like to take some time to do is to talk through the Christmas card that I put together this year and show you how it was built within Photoshop. About a month ago, I recorded several videos that are available either on my YouTube channel or at trappinglight.com showing how some of the tools within Photoshop, like clipping masks and text layers and that sort of thing, can be used to build a holiday card. But those showed single, isolated aspects of designing a card without really pulling everything together into a single workflow. In this case, what I want to do is do a complete stem to stern walkthrough of a Christmas card, showing what order I used to build the elements in the card and how I pulled everything together within Photoshop. Now, because this is a total workflow video, I'm not going to be spending a lot of time talking about individual tools or how-to step-by-step instructions. If you're interested in learning more about some of those things, there are in-depth tutorials on my website. But let's begin with this. Now, just for reference, here's the final card right here. And here's what I started with. Okay, I started with an MPix guide file. I knew that MPix was going to be handling the printing, and so I wanted to make sure that they would be able to print my final file the way I wanted. So that's why I'm using this guide file. The first thing I did to the guide file was to add a blank layer, blank white layer. And what this does, and I've just selected it here on the layers stack, what it does is it hides the text from the guide file, but those blue lines here that you see, those are guidelines, and that shows me where the card is going to get cut when it's printed. And so I want to make sure that everything that's important is within this center rectangle here, within these blue lines. Okay, that's what I need to know. That's really the important thing. The second step in my process after I've added that blank layer was to bring the photographs that I have into the document. Now at this point I'd had already a good sense as to what the final layout was going to be, so I knew that I wanted to start with my youngest up at the top, and then my oldest, and then my wife, and then me. Okay, now all of the images, the photographs that you see here were inserted at their original size, and that's pretty large because these were shot as raw images on a 15 megapixel camera. It's a Canon T1i. What I did is I converted them to smart objects, and let me just open up one of these so you can see there's a little icon here on the layer that you can see, and what that means is that it's a smart object. Okay, and the way to do that, the way to convert to a smart object, and this may be something that you can only do within full Photoshop, is to right click on a layer, and then there should be something, there we go, convert to smart object, that you'd see right up there, and that converts the layer to a smart object. The nice thing about smart objects is that they give me the ability to really indiscriminately resize a layer without any loss of quality, so I could experiment with the size of the image that I wanted. Once I brought them into the card document and I resized them and I moved them and I put them where I wanted them to be, then I made a few edits using clipping masks, and I'll open these groups up so you can see. In the case of my daughter up top, I used a couple of color balance adjustments and then curves layers, and you can see when I turn them on and off what that does to the image. On my other daughter, there was a retouch layer, which if you look at right here at her hair, you'll see the retouch. That's off, that's on. And then a levels adjustment to brighten up the image and to really take off the background. My wife was again a bit of a retouch. You can look right here on the image, as well as a little bump on the arm right there. The retouch took care of, and then I also did a levels adjustment to brighten the background. And on my layer right here, you can see that I actually didn't make any changes to it because, frankly, I'm perfect as is. So those are the initial edits, and that's really all I did to the photographs. Now you can see in each photograph here that there's a layer mask, and there's a big red X through it, which you'd get if you just held down the shift key when you clicked on the layer mask. That hides them. These layers are masked, but since the masking came later in the process, I've hidden the masks. Okay, so we'll get to those in a little bit. Now that the photographs are in and finalized, now I'm going to start working with the text layers. If you look at the final version again, you can see that a lot of what's in here has to do with text, and I'm going to walk through how I did that. Okay, the first text layers that went in were the main ones. Okay, and I'll just enable those right now. So you've got this believes in Santa, doesn't believe in Santa, plays Santa, and then for me pays Santa's credit card bill. Okay, now after these are in and I can see where they are, and at this point I'm really just playing with positioning. Then at that point I started adding additional text layers. And these additional text layers, and I'll ungroup them here. This is the Believes in Santa text. If I enable it, it's going to be all this stuff up at the top. So within this group, you can see that there's several text layers that are here. There's actually, I believe, 6 of them. And they're in duplicates. They're sets of 3, and then the 3 are duplicated. So you've got this reindeer and elves and sleighs and bells and blah, 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 blah. You've got it duplicated right here. Actually, there's 8 of them. So there's 1, and it's duplicate, another one, and it's duplicate, a third one, and the duplicate, and then a 4th one. And in each case, I went through and I colored them sort of a light gray, and then periodically I would, clicking on a layer, or clicking on a text layer, I'd select a particular word and then choose a different color to accentuate specific words. And so that's how that was done. And that was done for all 4 of the text areas. This believes in Santa, doesn't believe in Santa, plays Santa, and pays Santa's credit card bills. So I'll enable all of those text layers so that you can see them right now. So that's with all of the text layers in. And at this point, I really want to take a break from discussing layout to talk about a few things that are going on here in the layers palette. The first thing that I want to point out is how many of the layers that I've got here are grouped. You can see these little file folder icons within the layer stack. And I have, for example, I have a group for text elements up here, and then below that there's these subgroups. And then I've got a group for my youngest daughter, Natalie, for Lauren, and then for my wife and for myself. And the reason why I'm using these groups is because I'm working with about 40 or 50 layers, period, within this design. And when you start working with that many layers, organization really becomes key. If I want to work on a specific layer, I need to be able to find that layer without doing a lot of hunting around. So putting related layers together into groups makes finding layers as I need them much easier. And it's very, very easy to set up a group. For example, I've got 2 layers that aren't grouped up here. If I click on both of them, and then there's this file folder icon at the bottom of the layer stack, if I click both of them and drag them down there, then you can see is what it does is it sets it up as a group, and I can call this final text item. There we go. And then once I expand that, then you can see that both of the things that I selected are in that group. So using groups is very important because it gives your layer stack some order when you're working with lots of layers. The second thing at this point that I'd like to also point out is that the image looks, well, pretty bad right now. And very often when I'm working on a design like this, this is generally how it looks. It looks pretty awful. And because at this point, what my work is all about is getting all of the elements onto the document so that I can play with them later. Because I'm working on the text right now, I need to have this text all the way up at the front so I can see what I'm doing, so I can see it. But once it's all there, I know that the text should be behind the photographs. And at that point, it's really as easy as grabbing this text layer, right, this text group right here, and minimizing the group so I don't have to see everything, and then grabbing it and dragging it right down to the bottom of the stack. Okay, and this is another advantage to using a group. Rather than having to drag each text layer down individually, grouping them together lets me drag them all down at one time. So now the text is where I want it. Since I've dragged it below my image documents up here, the Nick, the Sarah, the Nora, Lauren, and the Natalie, you can see that all of my text is hidden behind these images. Because that's the case, now it's time to actually mask the backgrounds out of my photos. And so this is where I was when I started doing the masking. Now, for each photograph, the masking was done in 2 steps. The first thing I did is I selected this background, all this white area here, using a quick selection brush. So I just go to quick select, go to this one, and then just open it up a little bit and expand it. And actually, I went really large and just expanded to grab the whole area there. And then once that was done, I went into a refine edge just to clean that up. And I'm not going to bother showing you how to do it now because it would take far too long. Once that was done, and I had selected that whole area, then what I did is I used a brush, a very soft brush like this one, just a medium-sized soft brush, and I ran it across the bottom a bit just to kind of fade it out. From there, I grabbed some snowflake brushes that I found on the web and used those to kind of create the dissolve effect. So if I alt-click on the layer mask here, you can see how I did it. What I did is this top portion up here was selected using a quick select brush and then refine edge to really define the edge of the layer mask. Then I did a swipe on the bottom with a soft medium-sized brush just to kind of create a little bit of a fading out of the image, and then I used a series of snowflake brushes on the layer mask to create the snowflake effect that you see. And so that right here, you can see what happens if I shift click on the layer mask to turn it off. That's what it looked like before, and then that's what it looks like after. And I did the same thing with everybody's image to create that effect. So again, it's just a quick selection and a refine edge over the top, swipe with a soft brush just to dissolve the bottom, and then snowflake brushes, individual clicks on there just to create the final dissolve effect. And that, with getting rid of the background, all of a sudden now you can see all of the text. Now, the image at this point is looking pretty good, but there's still a few things that I needed to do. And the first thing that I needed to do is to really work with the text, the main text here. Right now, all of this is basically flat. And really the only reason why the main text is accentuated is because it's above the background text in the text layers palette. You can see that this is the Believes in Santa up here. This is all of the background text behind it, below it in the layer stack, so that's the reason why it's up front, and it's darker than everything else. But I still wanted to further separate the main text, and the way I chose to do that is with a layer style. For those of you that aren't familiar with layer styles, they're very, very powerful layer tools that can do a variety of things. They're located in this little FX button right here, so I would select the Believes in Santa, and then I would select the FX, and at that point it brings up a series of effects: bevel and emboss, stroke, inner shadow, all sorts of stuff that I can apply to that, just to that Believes in Santa layer. So that's what I did. In my case, I applied a drop shadow, and so I'm going to enable it now. If you look at it, that's without it, and that's with it. It just pops it away from the background text just a little bit. If I double click on the drop shadow here in the stack, what it brings up is the layer style, and then this is where I made my adjustments to, for example, the opacity, as well as the distance, the spread, and then the size of the shadow. And when I was happy with it, I clicked OK in this case. I'm going to click cancel because I don't want to make any changes to it. So that's what I did for every single one of the main text items. So for there's the Believes in Santa, and then there's doesn't believe right there, and then plays Santa right there, and close that down, and then pay Santa's credit card. Now actually the easiest way to do it once you've created it once is to just alt click on it and then drag it down, and that will actually copy the effect. So I didn't have to do the same drop shadow for 4 different times. All I had to do was do it once and then alt click and drag it down, and then I had the same effect on all the rest of the text layers. So that's pretty much the whole card in a nutshell. The final thing that I did was to place a rectangle right down here, and again I used another drop shadow just to pull it a little bit off from the background, and then in the middle of that I just used a final text element just to finish off the card. So that's really about it. And now I know I moved fast on this particular tutorial because it was really more about the process of design rather than the actual how-to steps involved. That said, if you've got any questions about the steps, feel free to either leave a comment on my blog at trappinglight.com or on my YouTube channel. And if it's something that you're curious about, I can do a future tutorial in that. In the meantime, my name is Nick Marzinski. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.